What's up, everybody? Matt Nuzzo here at Reel in the rental shop with no other than Brendan Guthrie. How's it going today, Brendan?
Doing good. How are you?
Awesome, man. Stoked to talk about some boards.
Yeah.
So we're going to go over a 1-year review of the Armstrong Wing FG. This is a really interesting board. It's been out for a year. Armstrong does a great job on producing products that they keep in their line for quite a while. They're normally a little bit of advanced in what they're doing, and then a lot of times the market kind of catches up after a little while in their designs and their design specs. So a lot of unique features in this board that we want to talk about, kind of talk about sizing and what sizing is going to be right for you. They have sizes from 34 liter, which is tiny, all the way up to 135, which is big. It's not the biggest by any means, but there's a good size range within there. I'm personally, my go-to board is the 48 liter. What board are you riding in this range?
So primarily on the 58 liter, I'm about probably 10 pounds, 15 pounds heavier than you.
Yep.
And most of the time I'm on this board with foot straps
to
do jumps and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I'm 170, he's 185 in pounds. Those are our go-to boards. I'm also riding mine strapped. I just, like it for control, for riding in waves. You can jump from time to time. My little baby credit card there jumps. But hey, get up there. If you get that foil out of the water, still jump. It still counts. So one thing that's truly unique about this board is the construction. So this is a proprietary construction that Armstrong has made called a carbon and negra sandwich. This is not something that they invented. This crazy dude, Biggie, what's up Biggie, down in New Zealand, made this stuff in his tiny little factory down in Taranaki, and the guy's an absolute legend, total ripper, and he made this construction for windsurf boards. And then Army has been working with him for a long time, and he's done a lot of prototyping with them, and they brought it into their manufacturing. Armstrong owns their own manufacturing, so they can do a lot of stuff and really perfect their manufacturing. And every year, their boards just get better and better. Yeah, I mean, it's like the construction gets better and better. And this carbon and negra construction is extremely expensive to make. And the only reason that they're able to make it affordable is because they own their own factory. So nobody else is doing this construction because it's just too expensive. It would be way out of everyone's price range. Armstrong's able to make this construction available to you at a more affordable price. Also, all these boards do come with board bags to make them protected while you're off the water. Carbon and negra, it's lightweight, it's extremely stiff, and it's very ding resistant, right? I mean, we put these things through the ringer.
Yeah, we got proof behind them. They don't crack as quickly as another board might.
Right, you have to
like throwing it on the jet ski, or I've had it where other boards, I drop to my knee real quick, or I have students do that, and you see it went right through the carbon.
There's no heel dents in my board. I've had my board for a year. There's no heel dents. That's insane. That's completely unheard of. Every other board we have in the rental shop pretty much is weekly getting ding repaired on it.
Yeah.
These, after major trauma of running into a jet ski, running it into the dock, or some falling out of a car, while it's moving, that's when those things are going. A couple other things that they've done here, just on the bottom of the board, you can see here we've got the dual carbon stringers. These dual carbon stringers run all the way up to here, and what that does is they fuse these carbon boxes to these stringers, which makes it really strong. One of the biggest breakage that happens in boards is the boxes break out. I'm sure you've seen it a bunch where the boxes literally just crack and then your board is cooked. Or the foam block moves out over time where they're set into. Well, these are set into the carbon strips. These carbon strips go all the way to the top sheet. Really, really solid. Also that forward geometry where they're bringing this forward here. The tracks are farther forward, so your effective feel of from where the foil is on the front of the board is a lot shorter. So the board feels significantly shorter.
Yeah, right? It basically has less swing weight on the nose because it's more under your body. So you're better balanced, which is better for takeoffs, for turns, all that stuff.
And this forward geometry does work with any foil. People often ask hey, I've got an Axis foil or a Code foil or something like that, and can I use an Armstrong board? Absolutely. They do make these tracks really long too. Armstrong was the first one to come up with some really super long tracks. They make those tracks long so that they can work with any variety of foil or tail. Generally speaking, I'm riding most of my boards about 6.5, and that carries across with all the Armstrong boards I ride at 6.5. Some of the guys that are really top riders, like some of the dudes in New Zealand, I'm saying their foil's way far forward, 10, 11. It's crazy. They got their tail all shimmed out. It's super loose. They're going 1,000 miles an hour. Where are you riding the board in most of your setups?
So most setups, if I'm surf foiling, it's right around 5.5. If I'm winging, it's usually 6.5. And it just depends on what front wing I have. So if I'm going a little smaller front wing, want more speed, I'm just pushing it back just a little bit, and then in lighter winds, I want to be able to pump it a lot easier, get more glide, so it's pushed forward just a little bit.
To have that boost. Awesome. And then they do have handles, except for kind of some of the real small ones. Most of them do have the handle on the bottom here, which is great. The next thing I want to talk about is the deck pad. They have created this proprietary EVA that is just really plush and comfortable. It doesn't tear you up as bad as a lot of the other pads out there. I mean, you're teaching a lot of people, and that's one of the things that like people's knees just get nuked. Feet and whatever get tore up. And this is soft, but it also has some control to it. So like if you get a really big, thick, squishy pad, you kind of lose a lot of control. So this is soft, so like it feels good. It doesn't like wear your feet out. You don't have like a lot of foot pain. It doesn't tear you up. And then it also put in these great foot wedges, so you kind of know where your feet are at any time. Like I said, I'm wearing straps, but when I'm transitioning, I know where my feet are. If I'm riding one of the bigger ones, like when I ride the 70 liter or above, I'll ride that strapless, and I can tell where my feet are at all times. They have this dual arch right here, which is really nice to tell kind of where you are in that.
Depending on kind of what your stance, I always try to coach people to be very centered over the board. When they're moving their feet around, you can feel whether your toes are hitting the edge without even looking down, and that's kind of the biggest thing, is like teaching people to keep their head up and see where they're going, and just kind of move your feet, so it allows them to lock in their heel a lot easier, and then turn upwind or jibe.
That's a great point, because I mean, when you're learning, if you put your foot an inch in the wrong spot, it's going to end badly and quickly. It just gives you kind of the bumpers to know where you are on the board at all times.
And one thing I didn't think I'd like at first, because coming from surfing, you usually have that full kick pad all the way in the back. They've just recessed the edges, so if you get a bunch of water, it just flows off the deck. And that's one thing I didn't notice until I saw it happening coaching, and it helps a lot, because when you touch down, the board releases a lot quicker, and you don't have random
bunch of water floating around, splashing around your board.
Which you've seen on
and it kind of like at first we were like, hey, where's the kick tail? Well, your foot's never back there. You never actually use it. On a surfboard you use it, but on a wingboard you never. Your foot's always up here, kind of over the top of the mast. So next thing is shape. So this was a shape that they took a lot of inspiration from their downwind boards. They want to make these boards fast and release easily. So they made them narrower and slightly longer. People get crazy hung up on the dims. I mean, how many times we talked to someone about a wingboard and they're just like, I ride this and I'm going to ride this. Like they have done all the research, they've looked at every spreadsheet of every board, and they know exactly what they want, but they don't know how it feels and how it rides. So the dims of this board and any board out there are not going to translate board to board. I just had this experience with a customer of ours, and he was like, I can't believe, like, I was really think I needed that. You recommended this, and you were right. And I can't believe how different the dims are, but it's the right size. And so don't get hung up on the dims. With this board, specifically the Wing FG, we found that you do want to have a little bit higher volume than you're expecting. So if you're a 100 liter board and you want to drop down to an 80 liter board, probably the right size is going to be the 90. Because per volume, they're not quite as stable as some other boards that are a little bit wider. This is a 70 liter board, and if you have a 70 liter board that's super wide and really dead flat, that's going to be extremely stable on the water. But it's going to be a sloth for getting off the water. It's going to be really slow. It's going to be harder to get
pump, harder to get speed.
That kind of thing. And it's just going to stick. It's going to create suction. You know, so these boards are very slippery through the water. This past weekend, I was riding my 48 liter, and the wind was just like 5 to 25, and I could get up off the water just a slight puff because I was able to get that forward speed. And that's what this board does, is it creates forward speed very quickly. And then when you're on that board, per volume, it feels so much more performance oriented than any board I've ridden. Even the big ones like the 135s and the 120s are very stable, but they actually perform really well. They just don't feel big. They don't have a ton of windage too. When you get to a big board like these guys up here, normally any other board that I've ridden that size in windy conditions, you have windage where it's just like pushing down on the nose and pushing on the board, where these just kind of through the air, they're flying through the air with a lot more ease.
Yeah, and I think they took that into consideration, making it both hydrodynamic and aerodynamic. Just the way Army designed the rails. So if it touches down, it's not going to be the full rail, which is what happens on most boards. The whole rail catches.
And then you stop.
Whereas this, you have like a smaller footprint, so you have stability at slow speeds, but then when you're touching down on foil, it's not the whole rail dragging. Which is kind of nice about the chine in the rail.
Yeah, and that's, you know, one of of the things that they did with their wing sup originally was this flat back, and they've really perfected it with the wing FG, is that flat back, that's something they got from the AC boat guys, and they talked to all the people working on the America's Cup boats and actually used some of their designers to help them give them direction on where to go. And they said, hey, anything off the back is just creating drag, those big chines, so they want to have the smoothest flow. And on this board, they really made the chine a lot more vertical as opposed to sloped, and that, again, that increases that water off the tail. Then when you move to the front of the board, you want to have something that's going to deflect easily from straight touchdowns, angled touchdowns, and like you said, when it's not like the whole rail doesn't get buried and then stop you. So like if you do hit stall speed or you do come around a turn and touch down, you're just going to glide down and pop back up.
Right. It'll displace the water versus catching the water and scooping out.
Right. Well, then you face planning.
Full yard sail.
Full yard sail.
One thing I wanted to mention, like I could ride the 48, but going on that small of a size, it's very unstable. And then going back to like recommending what volume to go through, even though I'm used to riding that small of a board, it's not going to work out to my favor on every occasion.
You just need too much wind.
Way overpowered, or I got to be way on a big wing. Why struggle and try to go as small as you can board-wise when you size up one length or a few inches, and it's going to dramatically increase your performance. You see the dramatic change when you go from a mid-length to one of these boards, depending on what you want to do. Like I ride the mid-length more in the surf, whereas I'm on the wing FG and the sound a lot more with the straps just to do air tricks and stuff like that.
And that's a good question for you. There's a lot of people that are really interested in the mid-length. How are you comparing size to size, mid-length to the wing FG?
It's more depending on what conditions they're riding in. If they're in a lot of like choppy conditions where it's not a consistent, swell from one direction, usually I'm recommending the wing FG. That way they have like a square footprint. If they're in an area where there's more consistent swell and they're usually riding in one direction, whether you're downwinding, you're riding on waves more, that's when I recommend the mid-length. Or if you have more variable conditions, go with the FG just because it has stability in light winds, but it also has better windage.
Generally speaking, volume to volume, say you compared an 85 liter mid-length to a 90 liter FG, that mid-length is going to be quicker rail to rail because it's so narrow, even though it's longer. It's going to be less stable.
Correct.
Even, it's slightly lower in volume, it's going to be less stable, but it will also take off from the water quicker because it's so narrow.
Right.
So if you want to have a little more stable platform, a little more well-rounded, the wing FG is going to be there. If you want to have something that's going to really take off, get out of the water, get up and going, quick takeoff, that's going to be the direction to go. I find that the mid-length is a little bit more of an advanced board.
It is.
And this is a little more all around. That being said, I've been riding mid-length 45 and 55 a lot winging. I went back to the 48 FG and I was like, oh, it's kind of easy.
It's just nice because even though it's a small footprint, it's way more stable at slow speed. So if you're practicing tricks or you're not really worried about paddling out to where the wave is breaking,
switching my feet and all that,
it's nice because it has more of a footprint for stability and foot switches, that kind of stuff. So racing too, if guys are getting into that, this is going to be a lot better just overall. Whereas the mid-length, it's easier to paddle. It's got that quicker takeoff because it's more elongated. So if you're, downwinding a lot more with a wing or you're riding in the surf and you might have to paddle a few times, it gets you up out of this, weight breaking zone a lot quicker than the FG might.
Thanks for all the information, Brendan. It's great to hear kind of the coach's point of view and kind of how these things are working and where they're working. If you have more questions out there in cyber world, give us a call to the shop, 252-987-6000. We are actual people. We are not AI generated. We actually take a lot of sessions, and you too can come here and join us in Cape Hatteras. We'll see you guys on the water for the next session.